Hey nerds, Todd Simmons coming at you with a little more Toddomation. In this video, I want to expand upon what we talked about in the previous video. We're just kind of getting to know Python in the Meraki Dashboard. I want to take it a little step further. So we're going to use some of the same Python that we saw in the previous video, but we're going to add some stuff to it. So I'm going to show you and provide templates and the actual code on my GitHub. My GitHub is Todd H. Simmons, and then this particular repo that's available to everybody is the Toddomation repo. So go ahead and if you want to follow along with the documents, the code specifically, and then the template that I'm going to provide for Excel, go ahead and run to my GitHub and just do a clone off that into your own GitHub, and then you can have the information. So if you want to know how to link your GitHub to your VS Code, I've got a video for that. I'll link over to that one. And then of course for security, we're going to need to hide our API keys. I'm using Windows at this particular point, so I've I've hidden my key inside my Windows environment. There's a video for that. I'll link over to that just to make sure that you know what's going on. But what we're going to specifically cover today is organizations in the Meraki Dashboard and then networks. And we're going to automate both sides of that particular process. Let me say, this is a great way for you to start a lab environment. So say you're trying to get more familiar with Meraki. You don't have to have a bunch of equipment to set up a Meraki lab. Certain aspects of the network won't be available to you, anything that requires hardware. But if you're looking to program SSIDs for wireless, or you're looking to create access lists, DHCP or VLANs, all of that can be done once you set up an organization and add networks with particular pieces. And I'm going to show you how to do that today. So let's get started. So what are you going to need? Obviously, you're going to need access to the Meraki Dashboard. And then you're going to make sure that you have at least the requirement, or not the requirements, you're going to have the ability to create an organization. So whatever your credentials are, those credentials need to be enabled for you to create things. So it can't be a read-only type API credential. And then you're going to need some sort of integrated development environment, you can write it on a text file. I don't recommend that, but maybe VS Code or PyCharm that's going to enable you to write the Python. And once again, I'm going to provide you the templates, make it a little easier on you. And then you'll need an Excel spreadsheet that's got the network information. I'm going to provide a template on that on my GitHub as well. So I'm not asking you to do anything that I'm not going to be able to provide to you, and you can kind of walk through it. So here we're going to create a new organization. We're going to use Python. We're not going to go into the Meraki Dashboard and do this. Then I'm going to show you how to delete an old or duplicate organization. One thing a lot of people don't realize is you can create an organization inside Meraki with the same name 25 times. And that's purpose-built because Meraki can't control the names of organizations, so they have to allow you to have duplicate names. But that can cause a little bit of a problem, and I'm going to show you that. And then I'm going to show you how to delete those other organizations. Then we're going to import the data from the Excel spreadsheet. We're going to do it a couple of different ways. First, what I'm just going to show you is just a simple Python program that's going to do it. Then we're going to take that Python program, and I'm going to show you how to turn that into a module. Want to start doing many more modules here. Modules are a way for us to be able to use the same code over and over and over without reading it in each time. I'm sorry, writing it in each time. And then we're going to use that Excel spreadsheet with the code that we created to add multiple networks into the organization with multiple options, which is really, really cool. So let's get our Python set up. So just to make sure, as we do this, you're going to have a couple modules installed. We're going to need the OS module installed. That way we can get our API key for Python securely from our Windows environment or from your Linux or Unix environment. I like to use pprint or pretty print whenever I'm printing out or showing you, the contents of a dictionary, just because it doesn't throw it all on one line and just word wrap it. It actually shows us the structure associated with that dictionary. Instead of requests, I'm going to be using the Meraki module, which is wonderful. It just makes things easier for us when we're working with the Meraki Dashboard. Feel free to use requests. If you're taking a cert exam and you're like, you know what, I need to use requests right now, totally understand. but I'm going to be using the Meraki module. Then we all have to have the Open PyXL or Open Python Excel. That is the item that's actually going to bring in the Excel information. If you're a Pandas user and say, well, you know, I could just use Pandas. Actually, Pandas uses the Open PyXL module whenever it calls. So do whatever you want there with Pandas, but my tutorial is going to show you through Open PyXL. And then import warnings. The reason being is there's a warning that pops up with the Open PyXL, the way that I've done things. And I just want to show you how to disable that warning just in case you're handing this off to a coworker or something and they don't like to see the warnings on their page. And let's go. We're going to go ahead and get started. So once again, remember that my GitHub repository is Todd8Simmons/Toddomation. And that's where all the files are going to be that I use in this video. So we notice we have this Excel file over here. I'm going to get to that in a second. I'm not going to log into my Meraki dashboard just yet. Let's go into the code over here. And the first one that we want to look at is this create org. So you'll see I've got a bunch of, well, I've got 4 tabs open here inside my VS Code. And let's go through the first one. So this first one, the create_org.py, just as it says, it's going to create an organization. So we're importing OS. The only reason that I import the OS is because my API key is inside my Windows environment. I have secured that. You don't want code with API keys or username or passwords in your code. It's a bad security practice. And then org name, this is the org name that I'm going to create, and it's called Toddomated Worldwide. That is the new org that we're going to create inside the Meraki dashboard. This dashboard equals Meraki.dashboard API, and then the API key, that's my actual API key, and then suppress logging equals false. So when you're working with the Meraki dashboard, you can choose to suppress the logging because it actually creates a pretty nifty little log file for you, or you can tell it to suppress the logging. Initially, I'm going to show you with the logging on, which means it's not being suppressed. So you can see what it looks like. But then I'm going to turn it off because it generates a lot of files. Well, every time you make a call, it's going to generate that file. So remember, nothing is actually happening here with this dashboard. We're just creating that variable, and that variable is going to run that method. So the response line here is just, standard response equals dashboard.organization. So this dashboard is now actually going to do something. That's this API call that it's going to make. That's the call that it's going to make to the Meraki dashboard. So the particular API call that I'm going to make is going to be the organizations.createOrganization, and then the org name is what you have to specify. You don't have to specify a number. You don't have to specify anything. Meraki is going to assign your org a name whenever you create it. So this is all we need. So it's 12 lines of code with spacing and comments to create an organization. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to hit play here, and it's going to create the organization, and there it goes, and it's done. So we can see some output here, starting right here. So this is that logging output that it's going to give us. Okay, it's going to tell us that it initiated a post, because in order to create something, that type of API is typically going to be a post API. And it creates that post to the API Meraki. So there's the organizations it tells us. And then the Meraki info organizations create organization. We got a 201. If anybody's studying for a cert test, 201 is a positive response. And the 201 is a response that's used for post requests only. Gets are using 200, posts are using 201. 204 is going to be a put, patch, or a delete. So we got the 201, which is what we wanted. Now notice over here I've got this Meraki API log. So if I open that up, it's going to show me everything that was done. So it created the organization. Once again, very, very long file. Created a Toddomated worldwide, which is exactly what we wanted. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and close this. Well, I'm not going to close. I'm going to close that log file. Now I'm going to turn off the logging, or I'm going to turn on the suppression. Okay, so I'm going to hit this again. And let me just clear out my terminal. And I'm going to hit it again. And I'm going to hit it again. Notice I'm not getting an error. It's coming back, and each time, if I would have left the logging on, you would have seen I would have got a 201 response code, which for a post means it all works. So it did not error out, which means that I have now created multiple org names with the exact same name. And if you're thinking, well, why would it let you do that? Well, imagine how many customers Meraki has. And if it's controlling how many org names can be out there, or how many matching org names can be out there, you might have a hard time creating your own org. And you might not have anything to do with anybody else's org name that may have matched. So say there's someone else out there that's got Toddomation, and they wanted to create Toddomation worldwide, and I already had it. Well, then it would be like an email address, right? And organization names are not like email address. They don't have to be universally unique. So Meraki allows that to happen. The difference being is each of these org names will have a different UUID. So now that we've covered how to create, once again, it's very simple to create an org name, create an organization inside the Meraki dashboard. I did it several times, quite frankly. I don't know how many times I did it. I wasn't counting how many times I hit play. So then let's go over to this get orgs. So what I want to do is I'm doing the same thing that I was before with the organization. I'm creating this API call. This time though, I'm just doing the get organizations API call. And then I'm going to ask it to p-print the orgs for me. So I want to see exactly how many orgs I have up there. So when I hit play on this one, and let me just clear it out down here so it's a little easier to see. And I'm going to hit play one more time. Uh-oh, look at there. I've got a few of them. Okay, so if I look, I've got Toddomate Worldwide 1, Toddomate Worldwide 2, Toddomate Worldwide 3, 4. I got 5 of them. So now when you log into your Meraki dashboard, you might expect to see 5 options for Toddomated Worldwide. Let's give it a try. So let's go ahead and log in. And Toddomation.net. I'm going to log in. Okay, and here I go. Oh, there we go. Choose an organization. So I have 5 of them now that say Toddomated Worldwide. Not exactly what you want. Okay, so if you have a case where you've created a bunch of the same organizations, so if I go in here and I go to Toddomated Worldwide and I click the first one, as you can see, there's no networks, there's no anything. So it's going to ask me. If I come over to the organization over here on the side, notice I have all these Toddomated Worldwides. Okay. Once again, not really what we want. So I'm going to go ahead and log out of my Meraki. Well, I'm not going to log out. I'm going to leave my Meraki dashboard here, and I'm going to come back into here. Now, with all of these Toddomated Worldwide, obviously, either I would need to rename them something else. I don't recommend keeping organizations that are under your control with the same name. So what we want to do is determine which one we want to keep. Now, notice I have this Toddomated Worldwide with a number each up here. So when we look at our output, this is how Meraki controls what orgs are what. Once again, they don't care about the name. You can have the same name everywhere. What they do is they look at this ID. So each of these IDs, you'll notice, are going to be very, very different. Okay, so what I want to do is not just print all the organizations. So I've written some other code down here that I just got commented out. And I've written the code already just to make the videos a little faster. That way you don't have to sit there and watch me type. Okay, this time what I'm going to do is say for org and orgs, right? Because orgs was my response when I did my get. I'm just going to give it a name and give it an ID, right? So I'm going to say org name. And when we look at our data output down here, so all of this is our org, so we can see our name, right, is Toddomated Worldwide, and we know they're all going to match. But I'm just creating a variable called name, and then I'm creating a variable called ID, because those are the 2 most important parts, and here's our ID. So what I'm going to say here, I'm going to comment that out. And I'm going to comment this line out. That was for a second here when we're going to correct error. So all I'm going to do is just use the F method to print the name and the ID here. Very, very simple. So let me just clear this out for you. And let me run the code now when I have just those items. So it tells me that I now have Toddomate Worldwide. I can see that I have 5 entries that are Toddomate Worldwide. And here's all of the IDs associated with Toddomate Worldwide. What I want to do is delete the ones that I'm not interested in keeping. And how do I know which one I'm interested in keeping? Well, it's this one right up here. And I'm going to uncomment this line. This is the one that I would like to keep. So what I'm going to do then is I'm going to go and I'm going to use an if statement underneath here. Okay, that's going to say not valid for anyone that's not this ID. So it's a simple if statement, right? So I'm going to say if the org ID does not equal Toddomate Worldwide, which is this one, right? That's that ID that I'm looking to keep. I'm going to say not valid, and then I'm going to make another dashboard call to delete organization. So once again, this is just another API call. And this API call is going to delete an organization. And how does it know what organization to delete? It's going to be based on this ID. So in order to make any changes to an organization, you're going to have the organization ID. So I've already got this organization ID programmed in here. So now every time I run this, if it matches or if it doesn't match this one, so it's going to hit 4 times. So I should see not valid come up 4 times, and then it will delete it. And then the last time it shows Toddomate Worldwide has this ID, it should not say not valid afterwards and not delete it. So let's run the code and see what happens. And here we go. The code is running and it says not valid, so it's deleting that one. Not valid, so it's deleting that one. Once again, not valid, it's deleting that one. Not valid, it's deleting that one, and there we go, then it finished. So we deleted 4 organizations based on the organization ID. So let's go back into my Meraki Dashboard, and I look in here. Well, you still have all these Toddomate Worldwide. Well, that's because we haven't refreshed our page. So let's refresh, okay? It logged me out. Let's log back in. And notice it took me straight into an organization. Why? Because there's only one organization left. And obviously, it's going to be Toddomation Worldwide. But because it's the only network that this particular login that I used, the only organization that this login I had is available to access, it took us right in there. And it says, welcome to Meraki Dashboard. This is what happens when you have no networks, you don't have anything in your system at all. Let me just expand this over here just to show you what that looks like. Okay, and it's just wanting you to add something, either register your Meraki devices, which is not a requirement. We're not going to have any Meraki devices in these videos that I'm showing you right now. Or you can set up the systems manager. So we're done. We've created our Meraki organization. We actually created 5 of them really, really fast. And then afterwards, we deleted 4 of the networks that we weren't going to need. So I said networks, I'm sorry. We deleted 4 of the organizations that we weren't going to need. So now we're in our Meraki dashboard and we have our organization set. And with our organization set, we can then go look at our Excel and make sure that we have the network information in that we're looking for. So let's move over here to the Excel. I'm just going to make this a little larger. And inside the Excel, you'll notice I have 3 tabs. 2 of them really get used with the Meraki dashboard. So we have our org. So it says org name. That's a header. And the way that I'm using headers is going to allow us to create dictionaries. So we have a header, which would be a key inside of a dictionary. And then everything that's not a header is going to be the value associated with that key. So in the first Excel worksheet, and let me break down Excel to you real quick, just to make sure that we're all on the same page. So Excel is a workbook. So all of these items are considered part of a workbook. And inside the workbook, we have these tabs. Now these tabs, their technical name is a worksheet. So with Excel, you have an Excel workbook, and that's the entire file. And then inside their workbooks, you have these worksheets. And I want to make sure that that's real clear, because when you see our Python code, we're going to call the workbook, but we're also going to start calling the worksheets. And the nice thing about this is other than a CSV, that really a CSV is just a single worksheet. There's no workbook CSVs. So with the Excel format, you can have a bunch of different tabs that are going to translate as worksheets, and you can store a ton of information and then pull all of that in using Python into a dictionary. So once again, we've got our org worksheet or tab. Next, we have our networks. This is what we're going to create, okay? And notice that when, for my template that I'm providing everybody, we've got the name, notes, tags, time zone, and then appliance, camera, cellular gateway, sensor, switch, systems manager, and wireless. And you'll see that that is it. It doesn't go any further after wireless. So these items here, notice it's a true or false, so it's going to just be a Boolean. Okay, so if you start typing in here and you notice, man, why did it go all caps? So if I go to type false in camera, notice it goes to all caps. Well, that's Excel recognizing that you're typing a Boolean value, which is nice, because when you import it into Python, it's going to show up as a Boolean and not a string. Everything else in here is going to show up as a string, and that's what we want. So we want Booleans to be Booleans. We want strings to be strings. And once again, these are our headers across the top, okay? And which means that we're going to have a key called name. We're going to have a key called notes. Each one of these lines, right, is going to be a separate dictionary entry. So we're going to create, with OpenPyXL, a list of dictionaries, and this is the information that we're going to have in there. All of the rows from 2 beyond are going to be the values, and those values are going to be associated with the headers, and those headers are going to be the keys. So I want to make sure everybody understands that we're using, in the way that we're going to set up our Excel, we're going to import it as dictionaries. You don't have to do it that way, but when we're looking to have so many different kinds of values, it only makes sense to do it as a dictionary, because if you did it as a list, you wouldn't know what was what. And that's what we're trying to do. So let's go look at our Python code. We've already done the get orgs. Now we're going to look at the get Excel. Okay, so we're going to start out with this as a just simple get Excel. Notice I do have the import JSON up here. There's an option to export this as JSON. I am not going to cover that today, because we're covering a lot anyway. But like I said before, you have to have OpenPyXL. Import warnings, I'm going to show you why. And then the pprint is I like. Okay, so here's the first thing. This warnings dot filter warnings is just a filter warnings method. I'm going to ignore any errors coming from OpenPyXL. I'm going to show you the warning, so I'm going to turn this off just real fast. I just turn it off by simply making it a comment. Okay, so I'm going to say I've got a variable called Excel doc, and it's Toddomation _ Meraki.xlsx. So just a standard Excel file, and you'll see that that's here. That's this file right here. Okay, notice it's Toddomation _ Meraki.xlsx. Now, the file that I've got on my GitHub for you is going to say template afterwards. Feel free to change it to any name that you want. Right now, it's a static entry inside the code. But let's go through it real quick. So WBN is workbook name. Okay, so that just means that I'm going to say the workbook name is this Excel doc. The org is my org information that I'm going to pull out of that. So it's a list, and I'm going to go grab the org data from it and add it to a list. And then networks. This is also going to be a list. I'll show you how we're going to get that. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to do is WB stands for workbook. And I'm asking OpenPyXL to use its load workbook command to grab the WBN, which is this Excel doc, right, which is this actual name. And I want to open up data only equals true. So I'm not looking to read. I'm only looking to read. I'm not looking to write or do anything. I just want the data pulled in. So then I'm going to say tab names equals WB.sheetnames. Once again, this is just a method that's included in OpenPyXL. That allows you to get the sheet name. So it's going to go and it's going to grab all of these sheet names for me. Okay. And then for tab names, so I know the sheet names. It's my document, right? It's your document. You should know the sheet names, so you're going to be able to pull that information out. Now notice that I've got an org and I've got a networks, and then I'm done. Okay, but down here I've got a validation. Okay, this is what I have done to make sure that we get things right. And this validation actually isn't needed anymore. When we go and we create these networks, there's only two things that are absolutely required to create a network inside the Meraki dashboard. The first is going to be a name. You have to have a name for that network. There's no option to get around that. The other thing is the time zone. You have to have a time zone for that network that you're creating. You don't have to have anything else in there, and it will create that network for you just fine. So what I have done to make sure that I get the correct time zones, because it's very particular on time zone format. If you're not using the time zone format that it expects to see, it will absolutely kick it out. So what I've done is I've created 5 time zone formats that covers all of the time zones here in the United States for you. So this is why we have to turn the error off, is because I am using a validation. So when you hit down here, I'm using validation to determine what you can put in there. And for some reason, OpenPyXL says that it doesn't support validation, but it does. So it confuses me a little bit. And because it confuses me, I'm thinking, you know what, it's going to confuse anybody else that says, well, we're getting an error on validation. It didn't work. It does work. I'm not sure why there's still an error there. Maybe somebody can answer me. So that is the error that I am turning off when I do this warnings filter warning. So we're going to see the error for the first time that I run this. So let's go back down. So we're only pulling information from org, and we're only pulling information from networks. We're not pulling anything from validation. Validation is just for the Excel spreadsheet. Okay, so as we look at this, when I go to the tab that says org, it's just a standard if statement that says, hey, if you're on tab org, this is the information that I'm going to look for. So I have the headers, which the header says the cell in worksheet 1. So one thing with PyXL is it does not start its numbering at 0, like a lot of things in Python. It starts its numbering at 1, and I think that they do that because it matches the Excel. So right now, here's the org, and we say if it's in 1, we're basically saying that that's a header. So anything going across here is going to be a header. And here's what's cool about OpenPyXL. It recognizes if your cell is blank, and it doesn't go any further, which is nice because we don't always have to tell it a range. It's just going to figure out. Now, it's going to go across and say anything that's here is going to be a header type value. So notice org is only going to have one header, which means org is only going to have one key. But when we look at networks, it's a little bit different. Okay, so after we've established that this headers is going to be anything in row 1, then we say for row. So it understands the rows. Okay, so it actually calls it ws.enterRows. Rows is our variable that we're assigning to this loop. It's going to say start at row 2. So if your data does not start at row 2, you can put whatever you want here. A lot of individuals will do merge cells to make it pretty, and they'll merge like cells 1 through 3, and your actual data starts at 4, right? So you can determine where this is going to start. So in my template, I don't have any merge cells. There's nothing pretty about it. So we're going to start the row values, and we're going to say that the variable row is going to start at row 2, and max row equals ws.maxrow. Here's what's nice. It knows that there's nothing in these rows, so the max row here is going to be 2. So it's going to start at 2, and it's going to finish at 2. You don't have to tell it where to end. It's smart enough to know. And then we're going to say, okay, values. So we just said that we're going to have keys and we're going to have values. So we're going to have to put this in a dictionary format. So I create an empty dictionary called values. And then I say for key in cell, which means it's going to say key is always going to be at the top. And then the cell value is always going to be whatever row it's on. So understand that if we had multiple rows, in the org scenario, we do not have multiple rows. So at this point where we have multiple rows, it's just going to take that value, okay? And it's going to create a key, which which we know. So the key in this case is going to be org name. So it's going to create an org name key, and then it's going to assign the cell value. So there's our value. Okay. It uses the zip, right, for method. And that's what's taking two pieces of information and combining it into one. And then it's going to append into org. So remember when we created this org empty list. So now I'm going to have a list of each one of those entries. So if I have lines 2 through 9 down here, I would have a dictionary entry, right, for that org name for each one of those orgs. And that's what that's doing. And then it's applying that dictionary to the list. So I'm going to have a list of dictionaries when I get this back. Now, because there's only one entry in org, I'm only going to have one dictionary entry. Now, let's move down to networks. So networks is exactly the same way. The headers are going to be anything in cell 1. Okay, so all of this is going to be headers. So we're going to have a lot more headers over here. We can see that we go all the way through K, which is what, 9 headers? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Sorry, I miscounted. 11 headers. So we're going to have, this dictionary is going to be much larger because it's going to have 11 entries as headers, which means we're going to have 11 keys. And each one of those keys is going to be represented here. So as we go through row in WS iterrow, so it's going to say the name key is going to be LA Office. Then in the same dictionary, so remember, each one of these lines inside of an Excel document, that's going to be a dictionary. So make sure that that's clear. We're going to use what's ever at the top of our header row as our key, and these are our values. So I am going to have here 6 dictionaries with all of this information in this single list, because you can see networks.append values. So I'm creating entries in this networks list. So this networks list is going to contain 6 entries, and those entries are all going to be dictionaries with key and value pairs based on this header and this. So we're going to have text for names, notes, tags, and time zone. And then everything else is going to be a Boolean entry of true or false. Okay. So as we start to collect that data, we're going to come in here and append that. So I'm going to run this real quick. And you may have noticed, well, Todd, why do you have something marked out? I'm going to show you in a second, because there is, remember, when OpenPyXL looks at this, it's looking for something that's empty. And it knows if it's empty, it's either, it needs to stop, right? Which means if this is empty, it knows, all right, I'm just going to stop because it's done. But what if it's empty, but it's not empty? I'm going to get there in a second. So let's just run this real quick. So I've got all my information. So what this should create for me is it should print my org, which is a list of dictionaries, and we should see it's a list of dictionaries, and then it should print my networks. Now notice I'm doing a print on my org. Why? Because I know it's only one. And I'm doing a pretty print on my networks because I know it's going to be a lot more than one. So let's just run the code. And here we go. And it ran with 0 errors. So let's go to the top. A lot of information. Okay, so look at this. User warning, data validation extension is not supported and will be removed. I don't know if that's true or not, to be honest with you. I've seen this error since day 1 that I started using this. This right here is the reason that I put that extra code in there to remove the warnings, because I know that it's working. And I removed the error condition because I don't want someone else to start coming back to me and say, hey man, what are you thinking? So let me go ahead. I print something and add that back in there just so I don't forget it. Okay. And then let's look at the output that we had. So I'm going to rerun the output just real fast so we can see it without that warning at the top. And let's expand this out. Okay, so obviously it got some data. So here's the first name. It says org name, and we can see that it is a list. Okay, And that list is a name, org name, and Toddomated Worldwide, which is a string. So when I go into org, there it is. It's got my org name key, just like I wanted. Okay, and it's got Toddomated Worldwide. Not sure why it created an empty list there, but now we're going to go into our p print, and our p print is going to say org name Toddomated Worldwide. It printed that twice for some reason. I got to figure that out why. I see why. Anybody else notice what I did here with the code? Notice that my print statements are inside my for loop. That's a problem. That's not going to work. That's why it printed everything out multiple times. So let me just move those print statements outside my for loop. And for right now, I just want to print the org to show you. I'm going to clear my output. And now I'm going to run. Okay, so there it is. It just printed once. It's funny what happens when you format your code correctly, right? So here's my org name. So this is a list of dictionaries. It only has one dictionary in it, as we can see. And the dictionary only has a single key value pair. My key is my org name, and my Toddomated Worldwide is my name. And you might be like, well, Todd, why'd you need that? I'll show you that in a minute. Remember, anytime we assign a network, we have to know what org it's going to. So that's the reason why the org name is over there, because we're going to have to go get the UUID for that org name later. Okay, so that worked just fine. So let's clear this out again. And now let's just print the networks. Alrighty, so let's look at the networks. Bring back up the network tab over here on the left. And our first network is name. So it's got a name as its key. So once again, look here. See how we've got this open bracket, which is showing us we have a list, and now we have a dictionary. So we now know that we have a list of dictionaries inside this. In the first one, its name is LA Office. Well, look at there. There's LA Office. Okay, and LA Office, its notes was California Support Team. Well, what do you know? Look at there. The note is California Support Team. It is, notice that both of those are string values. Okay, so we move to tags as West. And if somebody says, yeah, Todd, but tags have to be a list or an array specifically. You're right, and I'm glad you caught that. And I'm going to show you how I'm going to fix that in a little bit. Next thing is time zone is a list. I'm sorry, it's not a list, is a string, but it's a perfectly formatted string for what Meraki's going to want. And now notice I've got booleans. Appliance, true. Camera, none, none, none for sensor, cellular, gateway. Okay, but switch comes back up true. Systems manager comes up none. Wireless comes up true. And notice that the only one that has all of these is our new Memphis headquarters. If you've been watching my video, you know that super proud of my wife. She got into what I call med school. It's PA school, physician's assistant. So we are temporarily located in beautiful Memphis, Tennessee. But notice that Memphis is the only one that's got true on every single one of our options. Now, these are the types of networks that you can have inside Meraki. So if you're like, Todd, what's a cellular gateway? Well, cellular gateway is just one of Meraki's products. So these are all the different products that can be used inside Meraki. So if you're only using switches and wireless, you wouldn't need those. My recommendation when you're creating a network, especially if you're one to kind of do some studying, you're creating a lab type environment, even though you don't have equipment, is to add them all. Because if you add them all, then you can start messing with the configuration, because an ACL or ACL for a WLAN or a wireless network is going to be completely different than it is for a firewall. Also understand that when we look at this and we say, so let's look at the Memphis one here, okay? When it says appliance, that means the MX appliance, and that's the Meraki firewall. When it says camera, that's the camera system. That one's pretty easy to understand. The cellular gateway, that's the MG product line from Meraki that actually kind of, it makes it your internet connection link. So a lot of times you'll have a cellular gateway, which is what that is. You have an external antenna because you're, maybe you're out in the middle of nowhere and the closest cell tower is 7 miles away. So it kind of boosts. It's a cell booster is what that is. But that's what you're using for internet connectivity because you have no wired or wireless internet there. That's where you would use a cellular gateway. A sensor is just a sensor inside your network to do consistent testing. A switch obviously is a switch, one of the MS switches. Systems manager, I don't want to get into too much, but it's another product that you would purchase, the SM, to kind of manage different aspects of the network. And of course, wireless is going to be the MR, kind of their flagship product of what they were doing. So notice that it took all of this information and it created a dictionary for me. And it has a name, its notes, its tags. Yes, I know tags are going to have to be an array. We're going to switch that. And here's the other thing. This has to be an array too. When we go to configure a network, all of the product types you have to send through, and you have to send through in an array or a list. If someone's saying, hey, Todd, why do you keep saying arrays? Why do you keep saying lists? Well, when you're doing an API call, a list is an array because it's not going to be changed. It's immutable. So a lot of people will say list. A lot of people will say arrays. If you're using an API call, right, that list is going to be identified in an API as an array because that's how JSON identifies it. So JSON has array support. It doesn't. It's a list, but it's an immutable list, and an immutable list is an array. There's no difference between the two other than one you can change and one you can't. So here it is. We have all of our data. So we've got it. But let me show you something. Let's say somebody gets cute. Okay, and I put this in here for a reason because it's something that I've had to deal with. So you've got a project manager, and your project manager more than likely is kind of maintaining some of this data. Say it's a new install somewhere, and they want to highlight the name column. And let's say they do the first 20 rows, and they want to put a color in there just to identify. Well, let's not use yellow. Let's use something nice, right? Let's use a butterscotch here. This one is specifically for one of my coworkers. His Wi-Fi hacker name is Mutated Butterscotch. This is his color. So let's just throw a butterscotch color in there to the first 20 lines. Okay. Now watch what happens when I rerun this code. Actually, I have to save it. Remember to always save your source documents if you make a change. So I've saved that. Okay. And watch what happens to my output. Very, very different set of outputs. Look at all these nones. None, 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 none. So everything after Boston, right, shows up. But you're like, well, Todd, I thought you said OpenPyXL knew when something was there. Well, it does. And something is there. It might not be a value. It might not be a string, but it is something that's there. That color puts a code inside that cell. And that when OpenPyXL looks at that, it doesn't say, is it a string value? Is it a color? It doesn't do any of that. It just says, is there a value in there? And because there's a value in there, it's assuming that you want the information. Notice it stops at line 21 because there's nothing in line 21. That's what these values are here for. So if you do have a value in here, okay, and notice at this point when we've gotten it, we're getting it as, I put it in here as row 0 because that's how Python looks at it now. So if you have someone that did a bunch of coloring in there, you can uncomment this line. Now when you do that, of course, you're going to need to change your indentation. Okay, and actually it wouldn't affect that one, so I'm not going to make that change because it's not in the org. We only changed it in the networks. So you can uncomment that line. Adjust your spacing or your tabs in this point. Okay. And now I'm going to run it again. So now what I'm saying is like, hey, if it's not none, right? If it's something else, which is going to be a color, just ignore it. Okay. So let's see what happens. As we can see that we printed last time. We got a bunch of information that we flat out did not want because those colors were of no value to us. We're looking for some sort of text, string, or Boolean value. So I put that back in there. Let's run it again. And notice that fixed our issue. The last one it ended up is Boston. So that's just a little bit of tidbit of information in there for you in case you run across that when you've got colors or something is in there. I am going to remove those colors at this point and have no fill and save that back, which means that I do not have to have this extra line of code in here, which is the if row 0 value is not none. And I'm going to remove my indent from there and make sure I've saved everything and run my code again. And we can see it's working again. Okay, so there you go. We've got all the information that we now need, and it's coming from an Excel document. There's just a problem. If you have to put this in every single one of your Python files that you write, it's just repetitive. There's no reason to actually do that. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to show you how to make this Python file itself, this Python file, the get_excel_data.py, I'm going to show you how to make it a module, okay? It's very, very simple. Check this out. I'm going to call this, I'm going to define the get data, okay? And then I'm going to take all of this information that I've done right here, and I'm going to change its indentation level. I'm going to turn off my prints because I don't need prints inside of a module, and I'm going to turn on a return. So notice I have two pieces of information in there. A lot of people say, well, how are you returning two different things? Well, I can call two different things. So I have an org list and a networks list, and I know that both of those items contain dictionaries. I can return those. That's it. It took 2 lines of code to take all of this code and then turn it into a module. Okay? There's something in the software world called DRY, D-R-Y, and it's a coding principle that says do not repeat yourself, right? That's what modules do. Modules allow you not to repeat yourself. So every time I need Excel data, right, I can just call this without having to repeat myself over and over because I'm using the code as a module. And using modules is the way to go. So you might be like, well, how am I going to get that module inside my code? I'm glad you asked. This is how. These import statements, that's all you're doing. You're just importing somebody else's Python. Somebody already wrote it, and you're just importing it is all you're doing. So we now have all the information that we need about our networks, right? We pulled all of that information in. So the next thing we need to do is create our networks. Well, here we go. So notice the first thing is we still have all of our standard import statements, but here's a new one, okay? From get Excel data, import get data. So I have this Python file in the same working directory as the create_networks Python file. So it automatically saw that that was there. Watch, let me show you. I'll actually retype this for you. So from get, and it sees it immediately, right? There's a bunch of gets in here, but I know I want the get Excel data. And when I type that, I'm going to say import, and I'm going to say get, and it automatically sees the get data, which is part of that as a method. And there it is. I've got it. Okay. A couple other things that we're doing here is the API call. Once again, we're doing it securely. I'm using an environmental variable to get my API call. Now, let's look at a couple other things in here. So notice this Meraki products. Okay, I know what Meraki products I have. These are all the Meraki products that are actually available. So even if you're not using that, I create this, and I'm going to show you why. There's a couple of different ways to do what I'm going to do a little bit later, but I've done this specifically. This new networks is going to be a list of information. As I go grab those networks, I'm going to add things to it. First thing now is the org_excel, networks_excel get data. Okay, I'm calling the method that we just wrote. And notice I have 2 variables that I'm assigning, which the org_excel and the networks_excel are going to correspond to how I return the data. Okay, so notice when I'm returning org, so the first one that I list as my variable when I call this method is going to return the org information. So when I did this here, I know that I'm getting the org data from Excel and the networks from Excel, and that's how I'm returning it. So very, very important. If I swap those out, right, my code's going to get all screwed up because the data that I'm looking for is not going to be there. So that's the first thing that I'm going to do. So let's just show you real fast that that works. And I put the exit here just because I don't want the code to go any further. Somebody say, well, use a break, use this, use that. I use exits. And I'm going to change my variables because I made a change. So I'm just going to print org Excel, and this is going to look like the same print that I've been doing the entire time. The difference is, instead of writing all of that code again, right, which was how many lines? 58 lines of code. So instead of writing 58 lines of code again here, I'm just going to write one. Okay, and there we go. It's returning the exact same information just like I had wrote the code. That's why we want to start using modules as we do things, right? Remember the dry method. Don't repeat yourself. Okay, so now I'm going to remove this exit statement. I'm going to leave this p print in there just for you guys or gals that are using this. Okay, couple of the same things, right? So here's how I'm going to connect to the dashboard using dashboard. This is not new, right? So, but I am suppressing my logging. Okay, the orgs, I'm going to return all of the orgs that I have access to. And you might be like, Todd, what do we need that for? Well, because I need the ID, right? I need the ID that I'm going to pull out. Now, I only have one. I could hard code this in there. It would be very easy to get. If you've watched my previous video on Meraki, I showed you in the GUI where to go get that. But now we're not hard coding if we don't have to. Okay, that's a static entry. So what I'm going to do is just say for any organization in orgs, and I know that I only have one. Okay, but it's in a list. And so we use the for loop, and then we use this variable, the org variable, to actually go get that ID. So what I want to say is if the name is the organization name, which is this organization name, because I know what I'm looking for, right? So I'm pulling out Toddomate Worldwide. I'm saying, hey, if it's Toddomate Worldwide, because you might have 19 organizations inside your Meraki dashboard that you're responsible for, right? So we need to be able to go get the exact one. So I'm going to apply this variable organization ID if the name that's pulled matches this name. Now, if you're like, well, Todd, there's only one, you're right, but there might not always just be one. Okay. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to say for network in networks Excel. So this is all of this information, right, that we just had. These are the networks in network Excel. This is a list of networks, and the networks are defined by a dictionary. Okay. So as I go through this, I'm going to create a new dictionary each time called network dict. So I'm going to start to pull that out of that list. Okay. So I'm going to say that the name is the network name, right? So lowercase name. I'm going to say the tag is the network tags. Okay. So right now, the way that I've written this, it's only going to work if you have one tag. Okay. In a later video, I'll show you how to put multiple tags in there because it's certainly possible. But right now we're working on one tag. So I'm going to then say the network dict name. So I'm identifying this name. So as we go through this, the first thing I'm saying is, hey, this is going to be LA office, right? Then it's going to be Tempe campus. Then it's going to be Memphis HQ. It's going to go through there and it's going to create an entry or a key value inside this network dict. So instead of having the dictionary be all of that information, now I'm going to create a dictionary whose key is going to be that network name, and then I'm going to throw all the information associated with that network into a different dictionary. So this LA office, Tempe campus, Memphis, all these are going to become a key, not a value, but a key inside that dictionary. And the name of the dictionary is network_dict. And then these key value pairs are going to be associated inside that. So it's going to allow me to separate, right? So I don't have to worry about it being in a list and not knowing what's what anymore, right? So I'm going to break it down a little bit differently. So inside this network dictionary with the key name, right? So LA office, Tempe campus, I'm going to say notes is going to be anything from the notes file. tags is going to be a tag, and notice it's here. So that's going to allow me to make that a list now, and send it through as an array. And then time zone is going to be this network time zone. Remember, it's got to be perfect. And then products, right now, I'm just going to say is an empty list. So we have to have tags and products as lists when we send them through. Okay, so this is how we're doing that. Now, notice that I've got a bunch of if statements here. And a lot of people, when they start writing their code, they're like, you know what, I'll just do an if statement. There's nothing wrong with this. It's going to work, I promise you. But there's a better way to do it. But I'm going to show you that this did work. Okay, so what I'm doing is I'm saying if network appliance is true, right, then I want to append it to the appliance list, which is here. I'm sorry, to the products list. I apologize. So notice I've got products here, which is a key inside that dictionary. And I know that it's a list because I told it to make it a list here. I'm then going to append that appliance, the name appliance, to that. If they have cameras in their network, I'm going to apply the name camera or append the name camera. So notice I'm appending into a list. So I'm making different items inside the list, and it's only if it's a true value. So all those other none values that we saw here, none of these that say none is actually ever going to end up in this list. Only the Boolean value true is going to end up in the list. And that's how I'm going to tell the Meraki dashboard that those networks contain appliances or cameras, or whether they don't contain those. Because the only thing that we're going to send through in that list is going to be what products are assigned to that particular network. Okay, so let's just print. So once I'm all done with this, okay, there's a lot of extra spaces here. I am going to take that as I go through each one of those, and I'm going to assign it or append it to this new networks list that I created before. And you might be like, well, Todd, you still got a list of dictionaries. I do, but I have a list of nested dictionaries now. And that list will allow me to loop through that list based on the new key, which is going to be this network name. Okay, and that's how I chose to do it at this point. So after I do that, so now I want to print my new network. So let's see how different it looks. So I'm just going to go ahead and stop the program at this point. So I'm going to run this, which is then going to go get the information from Excel, and it's just going to put it in a new data structure for me. So let's change this. Let's clear it. And then let's run it. Okay, so look at it now. So I still have my list, but now I've changed the way that the data is formatted. And I've got an LA office key, I've got a Tempe campus key, a Memphis HQ key. Notice that they match these over here. So I've taken these values and I've made them keys. And then inside those keys, I've put what's associated with that network. So notice that the notes still says California Support Team. Products, look, I've got a list now. And it's going to tell Meraki what items, because that's got to be in a list. Now, of course, as an API, it's going to send it as an array. So hopefully I'm not confusing anybody by saying list an array. But in the API, this sends as an array. So I'm saying that the products are going to be these products. Now, notice there's no nones, there's no trues. I was able to take that information from Excel and based on my code say, well, it should be this or it should be that. And the only one that has an array with all of the products are this Memphis HQ, which, if you look over here, okay, is the only one that had that. So we know that our data is getting put in to this properly. So this is now my new data structure, and I can use this data structure to send it up to the Meraki dashboard. Now, once again, as I talk about dry, do not repeat yourself. Notice that we kind of repeated ourselves. And if someone says, well, it's a different line for each one, it is. But it is incredibly repetitive. There's a better way to do this. But if you're very new to Python, once again, this is fine, right? Go ahead and go with this. It works, right? So the first part of writing code is making sure it works. I got to thank Kirk Byers. Kirk Byers is the guy that told me, hey, make your code work first. And then after your code works, then you can start to refactor the code, right? Refactoring the code means you're going to do something to make it better. So remember up here when I did this Meraki products? Well, I know that these are the only Meraki products that I can have, at least right now in January of 2023. These are the products that you can have. So I created a list of those products. So because I know what products are going to be listed over here, okay, I can then come back and say, you know what? I can do this with less code. And that's what this line does. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to turn all this code off by commenting it out. And then after I've got that commented out, I'm going to uncomment this line. So what I've done here is saying for product, so it's just another simple for loop, and I've got something called product. In Meraki products, that's this list that I have up here. If network product, so now I'm asking the dictionary that we're already in, right? Or for the list that I'm already in, looking at this, saying if this product equals true inside this list, right? So just to show you what that's saying is if this, here's the product, if they get a true inside for one of these products, like this wireless is true, because I'm going through this, so I'm saying, hey, if it's appliance, it says true. If it's camera, it says true. If it's cellular gateway, it says true. When it says true, I'm saying to that particular key, right? So whether it's LA office, Tempe campus, Memphis headquarters, that key, the product section, append that product name. It's the exact same thing that I did with, what do we have? So 39 through 52. So that's going to be 14 lines of code. I've done the exact same thing with 3 lines of code. This is what some would say, well, that is a Pythonic way or using the Python way. So this works, but a lot of people say, well, it's not very Pythonic. I'm less concerned with Pythonic other than, it just being great code. So let's test it. So I've done the same thing, and I'm going to print the networks. Let's see if they print exactly the same. And I didn't get an error. And does this match? It sure does. LA office still has the exact same items. Let's look at Memphis HQ. Notice it's got all the products. It's the only one with all the products. So we took 14 lines of code and turned it into 3 lines of code. Both have the exact same outcome. So I'm going to leave all this in there in case you want to play with it. But I am right now going to leave all of these if statements uncommented. I am going to remove the exit. I am going to comment out the pprint for you. All right. So now we have this new networks list. And once again, it's a list of nested dictionaries. So I'm going to use this to go through it. And I'm going to assign, as I go through it, so I have an entry in new network. So remember that first entry is just going to be my first key. Okay. Well, then I'm going to go and say for network and value. So now I have a key and a value. So now I know I'm going through a dictionary. So I have to use this items. If you're not familiar with the .items when going through a for loop, this is just a way it's actually going to unpack the key and variables for you so you can validate what it is that you're looking for. So network is going to be a key, right? So when I look at network, it's going to be this network key here, and then I'm going to have values associated with that. So if Tempest Campy is the network, right? That's the primary key. Then I'm going to have inside there, there'll be notes, and the notes value for Tempe campus would be campus location in Arizona. Okay, same thing. So I'm looking at the products, the time zone, the notes, and the tag. So I'm just now ordering this in a way that the Meraki API wants to see it. That's all I'm doing here. So they have very specific designators at which they use. So I am going to bring this a little wider. I apologize. My linter, my black linter is not working. And I've got to figure out a way to fix it. So I'm just going to make this bigger for now. So notice here, I've got an optional print statement. So what I want to do is just print the organization, the name, the product times, the time zone, the notes, and the tags for each one of those. Now, I am going to exit because I don't want to print every single one of these. I don't think there's a reason at this point to print them all. So I'm going to use the exit. I'm going to print that. And here it is. So here's my organizational ID. Remember, I got that at the very beginning of our code. Okay. Now I have the network name that we're going to print. Okay. The network name, the products is going to be this list. So the LA office is going to get the appliance, the switch, and the wireless products. It's going to get a time zone of America, Los Angeles. It's going to get a note of California support team, and then it's going to get a tag, and the tag has to be in an array when it's sent to an API of West. That is the data that the Meraki API must see in order to configure the network the way that we've done it. Okay, so that's working. So the next line then, so I'm going to remove the exit. I'm going to comment out the print for you, is this one. This is where we're actually going to make the change. And when I say make the change, I mean this is where we're going to add the network. And what we're telling it is dashboard, organization, create organization network. So the first thing we need is the org ID. So we now know what organization, so this is going to be Toddomation World or Toddomate Worldwide. And then it's going to give the name, which we've already identified, which is going to be LA office, Tempe campus, Memphis HQ, right? These names over here. It's then going to give an array of product types, and the product types are going to be based on these Boolean statements here. And then I'm actually saying the time zone, so you actually have to send it this way because there's no order. The organization ID, the name, and the product types, those are an order that's already specified. It wants to see those three things in there, okay? Then the time zone, we actually have to tell it what the time zone is, right? So we're having to add this variable in there, which is a requirement in Meraki if you're going to add it. The time zone's required. The notes and tags are not. Actually, the product types are not actually required either, but why would you want to create a network with no product types? So we have all of our information inside of our networks, right? So we've got a list of nested dictionaries. The name is the top dictionary, and all of this information, right, is associated with that name. So it's just dictionary entries, key value pairs inside that name. So now we're going to run it. And here we go. So because we have all of our print statements turned off at this point, we don't want to see anything come in here except it just come back to our cursor. When it does that, it tells us, oh, you know what? Everything is now right. It put everything up there. And once we get our cursor back, we can go check it. And there it is. So what was that? 10, 15, maybe 20 seconds? So at this point, it's done. We got no errors. That means that we should have 6 new networks inside our Meraki dashboard. So let's check it. So we're going to go into our Meraki dashboard. Okay, still logged in. So we need to refresh the page. Look at that. We got rid of our page asking us to do something, and there it is. So you now have 6 new networks in there. It's got the tags. But let's choose one. So let's go select a network and let's choose the one that had absolutely everything, right? Was the Memphis HQ. So when I go to Memphis HQ, it pulls up and look at there. I've got cellular gateway, security and SD-WAN, switching, wireless, systems admin, cameras, sensors. That's it, right? That's everything that we told it to put. So it took all of that information inside of Excel and it put it in here. And you might be like, well, that's great, Todd, but you don't have any equipment. You're right. But I can still go work inside this. I can still go inside here and start to actually work and do some different things in there. So I clicked on SSIDs. Well, here's my SSIDs, right? I can start, configuring this. And it actually creates one by default because you added wireless. It takes the name of the network that you created, right? And just calls it wireless Wi-Fi. So it put that in there. So I'm going to write or do other videos that shows code about how to make updates to these different pieces of it, right? So when we look at the security and SD-WAN and you look at DHCP, well, we need to know how to automate DHCP. And as a lab environment, even though we don't have equipment, we can still use the Meraki Dashboard with no equipment to function in a lab environment. Okay, now that we've got that, we've got all of our networks in. We're coming into the end of the video. Didn't realize it was going to be such a long video, but hopefully you're getting something out of it. So let's go and look at one more piece of Python code. And this is, we just we created our org networks. That worked just fine. Now let's look at get_org_networks. So this is real simple. We just want to understand what networks we have. So let's say you've already created the networks. Obviously we have. And we want to show what type of information is in there. So let's just drop this down. So what I'm going to do, once again, very, very simple code. I'm going to just do my standard imports. So API key, once again, doing it securely. I'm going to create an all organization networks list. I'm going to log into the dashboard. Once again, suppress logging equals true. Orgs, I've got to always get the orgs because in order to get the networks associated with the org, you have to have that org ID. I'm going to get the org ID just like I did before. Okay. And then after that, I'm going to look inside that org ID, I'm going to say network equals dashboard.organizations, get organizational network. So remember last time we had create organizational networks. Now we're going to get, so it's just a standard get command, get API. Using the organization ID. So what this is going to go do is just say, hey, give me all the networks associated with this organization ID. So once again, I didn't put the organizational ID in there. I'm actually going to use this API call to get my organization ID. And then with that organization ID for each entry, which there's only going to be one at this point. If you had multiple organizations, this would go get all of the networks. And then I'm just going to append that to all org networks, which I created up here, right? It's just an empty list. And then I'm going to print it. And this should show all 6 of the entries, the networks that we just created. And let's run it. And there we go. So here's all the networks, an API call. So we're looking at it. So here's the ID of each one of these networks that we created, right? Here's their names. Here's their notes. Here's their product types. Here's their tags, and then here's their time zone. All that worked. So notice that the Memphis one, once again, it's got the most number of product types. So all of it worked. Here are the 6 networks that we just created using Python to create the network, using Python to remove all the extra networks that we accidentally created, using Python to go get Excel data, to program the dashboard to create 6 networks, and then lastly use Python just to show us those particular networks. Okay, so that's it. We're done with the video. I know it was long. Hopefully you stuck through it with me because we went through a lot of different things. So if you have any questions, put them in the comments. If you have any comments, please definitely put them in the comments. If there's some things that you'd like to see that I'm not doing, put them in the comments. Let me know. I'm here to help out. I appreciate everybody watching. Please like, subscribe. It really does help. And until next time, talk to y'all later, nerds.